Okay, yeah, it is officially 3 o'clock, so I'll welcome everyone to this month's transition roundup. It's been a few months since we've seen everybody. You cannot hear me. Okay. Can anybody else hear me?
I can hear you just fine, Kate.
Angie Robinson cannot hear me. So,
I can hear you.
okay.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, I am going to reply to her. Thanks for confirming that. Anyway, it's been a few months since we've seen all of you. Thanks to the holidays
Can you hear
and
us?
whatnot.
Shake your head yes.
I'm sorry?
I think Monica just said yes.
Well, I think I missed something. Okay, getting everybody in here, getting everybody rolling. This is always fun when we're recording it too. So welcome to the February roundup. We're obviously a little rusty today, but we're gonna get going here today. We're very happy to have Beth Schultz here today from the Department of Ed to talk about graduation requirements and goal writing for 18 to 21 programs. Very thankful for her. She's a very knowledgeable lady. First, just a few housekeeping things. The last transition roundup is going to be on April 24th, and that will be the last one for this school year. We're not 100% sure what we're talking about yet, but we're definitely going to be touching on some of the summer pre-eds camps that are coming up and whatnot. Mark your calendars. Catch the College Wave. There are 2 remaining to be held. The Aberdeen Catch the College Wave is March 26th at Northern State University. And Spearfish at Black Hill State is going to be April 11th. So if you haven't registered your students for that, contact myself for the Aberdeen one and Steph Badwound for Spearfish. Youth Leadership Forum, it is coming up. It's about 3 months away, and I give myself goosebumps talking about it because it's coming up fast. June 2nd through 6th in Aberdeen at Northern State University. We are just about to make those delegate selections, so those folks will be notified here toward the end of March. And of course, the annual Transition Summer Institute registration is going to open here in a couple of days. So be on the lookout for that to come out over the listserv. We have the flyer is out on the Facebook page, so be sure to check out Transition Service Liaisons Project on Facebook. Anything to add, anybody? All right. And if no one has any questions for TSLP, we can sure move right into Beth's presentation. Thanks again, Beth, for being with us today.
Sure, not a problem. I guess I didn't know I was going to go into the goal writing, but we'll sure give that a shot as well.
Oh, my apologies.
Oh, it's okay. Probably ask for questions and then we'll answer the questions for those. So what I'm going to do today is actually, and I'm Beth Schultz and I am with the Special Ed Office and I oversee indicators 1 and 2. And indicator 1 is high school graduation rate, and indicator 2 is the dropout rate. So today I'm going to visit a little bit about what those graduation requirements are and some accommodations versus modifications and what that might look like. All right. And there I am. High school graduation requirements. Several years ago, back in I think it was like 2018, they revised the graduation rate requirements or changed them just a bit to make them a bit more flexible. And by that I mean they've changed them so now there is a base diploma requirement, and the students still need to have 22 credits, but the required credits maybe look just a little bit different. So the students have more options to be able, if they've got a different path that they're going on. So when we break that down, we looked at to see that they have to have 4 units of the language arts. And with those 4 units, 1 unit has to be writing, half a unit has to be speech or debate, 1 unit has to be literature, and then the students get to choose 1.5 credits of just any kind of language arts. I say credits, it's units of language arts electives. This is where the biggest change was made, was in that mathematics. So for mathematics, in order to receive that high school diploma, the students have to have 1 unit of Algebra 1. In previous years, I think they had to have Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, or Algebra 1 and geometry. It was a lot more stringent, and now it's just that Algebra 1 and then 2 units of math electives, and the students can choose what those are according to what your school offers. They have to have 3 science units. Only 1 unit is really required, and that's the biology. And then they have different science electives, 2 other units of science electives. 3 units of social studies, 1 unit has to be US history, and a half a unit has to be US government. The other unit and a half, the students get to choose what that looks like. 1 unit, and this can be a combination of CTE, approved CTE, a capstone experience, or a world language. And I think when they talk about a world language, I think that's like a Spanish if they're taking a foreign language. Fine arts, they have to have 1 unit of fine arts. Of course, that's your musics, could be your art classes, things like that. A half a unit each of personal finance or economics, physical education, and health or health integration. So a half a unit of each of those to a total of 1.5 units. And then 5.5 other electives. So as you can see, this really allows the students to really decide what those other electives are going to look like for what they want to do after they get out of high school. So if they're going to go on towards college or technical school, then they might choose some higher level classes. But if they're just going to the workforce, then maybe they're not going to choose those higher level classes. Again, it's going to be in that student's plan on what they want to do. Looks like I just kind of explained that, but look at all those other language arts electives that they can do. There is a lot of them, so they need that total of 4. When we talk about math, remember I said they have to have that 1 unit of algebra, Algebra 1. Now let's say you have a student that is struggling with Algebra 1. You could split that Algebra 1 class into 2 years. You could do part 1 the first year, or you could do part 2 the second year. It would still be 1 unit, maybe a half a unit the first year and a half a unit the second year. The other option is if the student is taking Algebra 1, they could take the Algebra 1 or the Algebra Enhancement class. So they take both of those in the same year. It's 2 different classes. And the Algebra Enhancement is kind of like double dipping. So you have your Algebra 1 class, and then you have your Algebra Enhancement class that's going to possibly teach the same concepts, but maybe in a different way. So the student's getting 2 separate chances to learn that information. Again, the Algebra 1 would be that unit that they need. Algebra Enhancement could then also be considered one of the elective classes. Just another opportunity for the students to show that they can do that algebra. And again, look at all of those other math electives the students could actually take. Oh, and there is just what I was talking about. The Algebra Enhancement is structured to support students who are currently enrolled in the Algebra 1, and this course includes material to prepare students for the Algebra 1. So you can have the Algebra Enhancement class earlier in the day and Algebra 1 in the later part of the day. They do have to be taught by that highly qualified that can teach that class. Then here's the social studies. Again, the must-have, and again, look at all those other classes that they could possibly use for their 3 credits of social studies. Science, 2 units. The only one they must have is that biology, but then there's a lot of others that they could take. To find this information, you would go to the doe.sd.gov and the graduation requirements. There's the graduation requirement handbook. The ARC is also there, and the infographic is there as well to use as you are talking with students and parents about what the student's going to take in high school. Start these conversations early with your kids. Start the conversations with the parents so they kind of know what's going on. Now, in that high school graduation handbook, that very first link there, on the next page is a document in that graduation requirement website that shows a document or a tool that you can use to help while you're planning out what the student's going to take for towards a graduation, to that high school graduation. It's on page 29. You can list the classes they're going to take, what grade, like is it going to be a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, a senior year they're going to take it, so that you don't miss something. So you know that they're going to meet all of those requirements. I'm going to tell a little story that my son, when he got to be a senior, he was going to have 2 study halls, and I told him, absolutely not, you can't have 2 study halls. I says, pick a class that you think is going to be fun. So he picked Greek mythology. So not something I would choose, but something he found interest in. Well, he ended up not being able to take that because when they were looking at all of his previous classes that he took, he had not taken personal finance or anything in that category. And so then he had to take that in place of the class that he was going to have for fun. That class is usually a class that is a sophomore and junior class, but somehow he slipped through the cracks. And when he was a senior, he almost wasn't going to be able to graduate. And they caught it in time that he was able to take that personal finance. So use all the tools available to ensure that your students are actually getting all of the classes they need to receive that high school diploma.
Beth, can we ask questions, or would you rather us wait till you're done?
Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. With the algebra enhancement one, that has to be taken the same year as
Yes.
the algebra 1 class that the student is taking, correct?
Correct, because they are
Okay.
companion classes. In other
Okay,
words,
and then
support each other.
okay, and then the other one was where you had algebra 1, part 1 and part 2. That is the algebra 1 class, but it's like just lengthened, right? I mean,
Right.
it takes long.
Yeah. So in other words, you're doing that class at a slower rate. So
Okay,
you're taking a whole year to do algebra the first half, and then algebra 1 the second half is another whole year. So you're going slower, so the students have more time to practice and learn the material.
okay. So that's, yeah, so the part 1 and part 2 wouldn't be considered an elective. That would be your algebra credit.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank
And I know that that's probably taking up a spot where the student could take an elective, but a lot of districts are providing enough spots that the students are going to probably get more than their 22 credits that they need. And this is just one option that they can do to help the students get that algebra credit, because I know that is one of those areas that students are having a hard time with to get that requirement met. And this isn't just for special ed students. This could be for any student that's struggling with algebra 1. We're hoping that it's not just special ed students, because students learn from their non-disabled peers as well, and it's those classes are there to help any student that needs that help.
We also have a question in chat. It says, can you go back to where I can get this page? And I'm assuming, do you mean where this graphic is at on the website, or the page she had prior to this one with the checklist?
So you go to this website, go to this link that says 2018 Graduation Requirements Handbook, and that's where on that page 29 you're going to find this document. Okay, it's on this link. Okay. Did that answer their question?
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay. There may be other tools out there as well. I just know I found this one in that 2018 graduation requirement handbook. Any other questions? All right. So if you go to that graduation requirements website, there's also a section that's called Students with Disability with Special Needs. And in there, you're going to find some documents. The second one that says Disability Policy Updated in 2020. By the end of this week, we're going to have that updated to say February of 2024. So we've made some changes to that document. And in that document, you will find information about, it's a good document because it has questions and answers. So if you do have questions and answers or questions, you might be able to find the answers there to some of those tough questions. It also, on this website here, you can see that there's a graduation coding guidance for students on IEPs. When we talk about graduation coding, we're talking about how you're coding them once they leave high school in Infinite Campus and what that looks like. Then there's also questions and answers on report cards and transcripts for students with disabilities and what that would look like. You know, can you say that it's a class for a student with a disability? And I think part of that answer is a no. I think, you know, because that would be personally identifiable information. And on a transcript, I don't know if you want to, I don't know, you have to read that document. It's been a while since I've looked at that document.
Beth, we
So
have
it
a
says,
deserter.
yep, I
Sorry.
see the question. If a district does not offer some elective classes and the special ed teacher is highly qualified in math, can a student take that math class with the SPED teacher, even if they are not on an IEP for math? Yes, but I think the SPED teacher then is not going to be considered a SPED teacher when she's teaching that class. She's going to have to do what they call a time study, or when she's teaching a class, she'll be paid from general ed funds. And when she's a special ed teacher, then she'll be paid with special ed funds. I've seen that before. Does that answer your question? Good question. You're lucky to have someone who's highly qualified in math that can help out to teach some of those classes. Again, remember to go by the end of the week and look at that disabilities policy document because it will be updated and changed. We're right now just waiting for the final edits and I'm hoping to get those by end of day today. South Dakota has one regular signed diploma. I know this is what really sometimes trips districts up. An IEP team may modify the course requirements, but this would then result in a certificate of completion. When we talk about modifying the course requirements, we're talking about, so they're going to take a different math class instead of Algebra 1. So if they don't complete Algebra 1, then they can't get that regular signed high school diploma. Or if they're taking something other than biology, they have to take that biology in order to get that regular signed high school diploma. So the definition of that regular signed diploma is students who exit on educational program through receipt of a regular high school diploma identical to that for which students without disabilities are eligible. In other words, these students meet the same standards for graduation of students without disabilities. It does not include an alternative degree not fully aligned with the state's academic standards, such as a certificate. And we're going to take out that district diploma or a GED because really there is really no district diploma. It's either a certificate of completion, a certificate, or a GED because there's really only that one regular signed diploma and that's that state one. So if the IEP team must denote whether the student will meet the same graduation course requirements as students without disabilities or if the team is modifying the course requirements. We're also talking about if they're teaching those standards at such a low content that they don't meet the same content standards. They have to meet the same content standards as their non-disabled peers. So look at those standards and see if it meets those same standards. If you're going to modify the graduation requirements, you have to document that on the comments in the course of study section in the IEP course, because parents are just not understanding that their students are not going to receive that regular signed high school diploma. And they must understand, as well as students must understand, what course they are on. If the IEP team should bring forward the modified graduation courses for this year. If a student's course requirements are modified, then the fate does not end, and they can actually continue on with their education until the year that they turn 21. And they could then even work towards that regular signed high school diploma, although it would take probably some work to get them there. So have these conversations early. Don't wait to have these conversations with parents and students.
Yeah,
Sure, you can ask questions.
Great. I have a question about the certificate of attendance. The problem with this is I teach kids with cognitive disabilities on the higher end. The problem with the certificate of attendance versus the diploma is that when they fill out a job application, kids who've come to school and done everything I've asked them to do to the best of their ability, when they fill out that job application, they have to say, no, they didn't graduate or they didn't receive a diploma. Is there any way we can change this? I don't understand why it was changed in the first place. It happened rather quickly without much discussion. Is there any way this can be reconsidered?
So first off, I don't know that it's ever changed. It's just that we never pushed the envelope until US Ed started having us report more definitively what that high school or regular signed high school diploma is. South Dakota has only had that one regular signed diploma, and the requirements have just changed, but it's made it more flexible because, again, the kids don't have to have as many math credits like Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. Now they just have to have that Algebra 1, so that it would be more obtainable for more students. As far as changing that, there are no plans as of right now to do that. I know at one time they thought about looking at an alternate diploma, but that's not in the works as of now. Right now, South Dakota just has that one regular signed high school diploma.
Okay, the consequences of saying, no, I didn't receive a diploma are kind of big, and I don't know if that was considered. So if possible, looking at an alternate diploma would do a world of good. Thank you for taking my question, though.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? So now we're just going to move on to that accommodations versus modifications. So what's an accommodation and what's a modification? So those accommodations are supports or services that help students fully access the general ed curriculum. They change how the student's learning, the way material is presented, maybe how the student's responding, and allows the students with disabilities the opportunity to complete the same curriculum activities as their peers. They keep intact the objectives of the content and the activity, and they allow the student to bypass the effects of the disability. Modifications, though, change the course content, the required work, or instructional levels. Changes the learning goal for an instructional student and are used when the general curriculum is too advanced for the student. Modifications usually involve changing an assignment or objectives. So it changes what the student is taught and expected to do in school, not how, but the what. Individualized changes made to the content and performance expectations for the students. It changes the complexity level of the information. Modifies the course or activity objectives to meet the needs of the learner. Allows students with more significant learning needs to experience the same curriculum as his or her peers, but with different learning outcomes. utilizes different grading criteria and or credits received compared to their peers. So that's what a modification would be. So what might accommodations look like in high school? So
We have
getting the
a hand up, Beth. I'm sorry to interrupt.
okay.
Beth, my question is if a student is in the gen ed classroom and then switches to an online learning classroom, is that considered an accommodation or a modification? Does it change the rigor if the student is still held to the same requirements, but they're doing online learning?
Is it a class that gen ed students, a student with a non-disabled student would take?
Yes, a gen ed student not on an IEP can take this online learning class. Like kids that are homeschooled take the same type of classes.
So then I would say that's not an accommodation or a modification. That's just a gen ed class.
So for them completing that online learning, they would still get credit for a diploma instead of certificate of completion.
That would be a district's decision, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because I don't think the content has really changed, especially if that course meets the content standards. You know, it's just, that would just be the, how it was presented. It's presented online rather than in a regular classroom setting. Okay. So accommodations might look like in high school, getting the content based on grade level standards. So it might be in a book, it might be online. Showing mastery of grade level content. Remember, that's what accommodations do. So accommodation examples, like you might have extended time or change the time format. Maybe students learn better in the morning or maybe in the afternoon. There's studies out there that say some high school students do better later in the morning than they do early in the morning. You know, find out if that is something that your student may help them with. Breaking longer assignments into more manageable segments. In other words, you're not saying you don't have to do the whole assignment, but you're just breaking it into segments. They're still doing the whole assignment, but just in shorter pieces. You know, giving directions in smaller steps, providing a graphic organizer, using audio text, you know, having it read to them. Nowadays, I think you can get almost anything audio anymore. I know I can, if I have a document that I need to really concentrate on, I like to have it read to me as I'm reading it because it makes me slow down. A lot of kids don't choose to use audio because they can actually read faster than they can listen to it, but some of them really do like to have it read aloud to them. Using a speech to text program for written assignments. Class notes, having some of those notes provided. Again, it's not what they're getting, but how they're getting the information. Large print, small groups, information received orally, and providing answers orally. Be still answering the same questions, but just in a different mode. Speech to text, that's where this computer does the writing, and text to speech is where the computer does the reading. So actually in a Word document, there is the read aloud speech section where you can actually have whatever's typed in a Word document read to the student can have that read to them. With the same thing with a Word document, there is also the speech to text where the computer will do the writing. It's called that dictation piece. How many of our students already use that speech to text when they're using their cell phones? Hit the record button and they speak into it and it does the typing. Sometimes it doesn't always look completely correct. The students may have to edit. The same here, they still might have to edit a little bit as well. These are things that are considered accommodations rather than modifications. It's just a different mode. There are some accommodations that could be modifications. So we need to look at what is being taught, the standards, and what the expectations are at that grade level. Now I know that this doesn't pertain so much to high school, but I like to use the one about the multiplication tables. So if you're giving a student a multiplication table in second or third grade, that might go against what is being taught because you're probably teaching them how and teaching them those those multiplication tables. But if you give them the table, then they don't have to learn them. And so then that would be a modification rather than an accommodation. But when you get up into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they've already learned those. And so by using a multiplication table or calculator, then that's more of an accommodation rather than a modification, because now you want to know if they know the process or if they know how to get to the answer, not if they know 5 times 3. Another one, reducing the number of items on an assessment. So if a student can show he or she can understand all the content needed for the assignment with less items, it's an accommodation. However, if a student's only being taught the easier items and doesn't have to cover all the content, then it's a modification. Again, when you're shortening those assignments, make sure that the student's still showing that they can do all of the content information. Here again is another math example. So if you have a math page that's filled with multiplication and division problems, but the student only does multiplication problems, then that's a modification because they're not showing that they can also do the division problems. Or if you have that multiplication or that math math assignment, and the students are only doing the 1-digit division instead of 2-digit, and there's 2-digit division on there, and they're only doing the 1-digit division, then that would be a modification because the expectation is that they know how to do 2-digit division as well. So what is the difference between an accommodation and modification? You remember the accommodation affects the way the student accesses the curriculum, whereas the modifications alter the material or the curriculum. So a modification removes the difficult questions on a test, which we've kind of talked about, doing open note testing. More material is provided, modifying grades for the IEP. In other words, you have a different grading scale for the student that's on an IEP that differs than those that are non-disabled peers. In other words, maybe the student that's on an IEP maybe get a pass-fail grade, whereas the other ones get the ABC grade. That would be a modification. Okay. Any questions? Or here's another one. So a 10-point scale rather than a 7-point scale. That would be a modification. So your student with the disabilities on the 10-point scale, but your non-disabled peers are on that 7-point scale. Again, that would be a modification. So it's a remember versus analyze. So cutting assignments, and I think we kind of talked about that. You know, for cutting the assignment, make sure that they're showing that they can do the content and making an accommodation and not a modification. Who needs to be involved in these conversations? As you can see here, it needs to be a multitude of people at that IEP meeting. It's that teamwork. It's the gen ed teacher, the special ed teacher, the parent, the child, the student. The student definitely needs to be there. When you put accommodations in place, they only work if the student's going to actually use those accommodations. You know, some accommodations have been put in place and students say, I'm not using that accommodation. And so it's not going to work for them because they're not going to use them. And you have to find out why they don't want to use it. Is it because they don't know how to use it? Is it because they're afraid their peers are going to see them using it? And so you have to maybe figure out some way else to provide that accommodation. Is it because it doesn't help them anyway? So find out why they don't want to use accommodations. And you have to have that. Is that conversation the same between parents and school staff? Do the school staff know what accommodations those students can use and should be using? Are you evaluating if those accommodations are being used? Again, it goes back to, is the student using them? And if not, why not? I think we're getting close to the end of my presentation. Are there any other questions? I know on the presentation slide that Kate had that it talked about writing goals for the 18 to 21. So what questions do you have for that? Oh, let's do the last slide here. The last slide here, I put also Lori Kwasniewski's information on here as well. She does the transition piece and she does the post-school outcomes piece. And so she's a great resource as well. I do the graduation and the accommodations piece, which they fit pretty good in hand in hand.
Thank you so much, Beth. Maybe I will get it rolling a little bit. And again, I apologize. We didn't communicate clearly, but I have heard from some teachers that when students get to the 18 to 21 program, you know, we're obviously looking at those more functional daily life skills. And sometimes it can be frustrating that they still have to address academic goals in the IEP. So what are your thoughts? Skills in academic goals.
So give me an example of an academic goal or life skills.
So a lot of times they're looking at like job skills, cooking, laundry.
So when you're doing cooking, aren't there some academic goals you could write for cooking?
Well, I think that's where the confusion comes in. I tend to agree with
And
you.
then your goals would be linked to that cooking that you're doing. You know, link it back to their job skills. Again, if you do have some of those academic goals, you know, link them back to what the students are doing. If they're doing project skills, link it back to skills, jobs that they're doing.
And we do have a question in the chat. Clarification, is changing possible answer choices from 4 to 3 an accommodation or a modification?
Again, you have to look at, so are they still going to show that they understand that concept like their non-disabled peers? You have to really be careful with that kind of a question, because are you modifying it? Get the answer right by taking out by taking out too much information. So if you only have 2 choices instead of 4 choices, that becomes almost more of a true. So again, you have to kind of look at that. Is it modifying it or is it accommodating it? Are they still showing what they know? So I'm not going to give you a yes or no, because it's going to depend. I'm putting on, sir, it depends. Yeah. And as far as writing goals for those kids that are in the 18 to 21 program, you know, write goals that are going to work for the kids. What do those goals look like? Because you have to have goals. You can't just have a goal that says the student's going to go to work. Because it still has to be measurable, and it still has to be something that the students need. So why would you write a goal that the student's going to go to work? I mean, what's work look like? What does getting there look like? Are they needing help with transportation? Are they doing public transportation? Are they having to drive there themselves? Are they having to, you know, what does that look like? When we say, do they have to have an educational goal? It's really going to depend on what the student is doing in that 18 to 21 program, and how, if you can come up with educational goals, then absolutely that you should be working on something that's educational with them as well as work related, because again, you can work on some of those educational goals as they're either in the workplace or doing some of those life skills classes.
Beth, I just want to clarify.
Sure.
So for an example, we have a student with a cognitive disability, right? When they're in K through 12, they are accessing the K through 12 standards.
Mm-hmm.
There are no standards for 18 to 21.
Correct.
So do we have to in the K through 12 world for cognitive, we would write reading, writing, math, and adaptive. That would
Okay.
be the practice that is what we have in South Dakota. In 18 to 21, would we necessarily have to do reading, writing, math, and adaptive for 18 to 21?
No. Probably the adaptive, because the adaptive is, you're going to be working on adaptive skills with
Okay,
them, I would think,
yeah, and
correct?
yes, absolutely. I think the adaptive, you could really encompass all of what they're doing in 18 to 21 as adaptive, right? Like
Mhm.
daily life skills, budgeting, social skills, I mean, all of those are really are adaptive.
And you could even do the money and the budgeting as a math skill or math goal even, because you know that you find some of those things in math. So if you really are hung up on it, you really need that educational goal, put it in a math goal and then relate it back to those skills that you're working on. And whether it's in the um, losing my words, in the your skills-based classes or your life skills classes, or whether it's in maybe at the job they're working on something like that.
Do they need to
But
be linked to a standard
they don't need to be linked to a standard.
for 18 to 21? Okay,
They don't have to have objectives either, because they're not taking the state assessment.
okay.
You can, I mean, that's up to you if you want,
Yes,
because sometimes
absolutely.
it's easier to measure them if there's objectives.
Is there a certain amount that they need to have?
Nope.
Okay.
Not a minimum, not a maximum. I mean, they have to have a goal.
Right, yeah,
You can't have an IEP without a goal.
yeah.
Any other questions? Or topics? I'm open to other topics too.
I guess the one question that Robin had asked that I got some confusion still on is if a teacher chooses to change it from 4 to 3 and it's not the special education teacher, is that, I guess, is that okay if the teacher's the one that does the modifying?
Is she doing that with non-disabled peers?
No. Because I'm worried if I modify it, I may modify it and get, like, I don't have the answer key, so I may cross off the correct answer. So I tell my teachers that they should be the ones to modify if they choose to modify it, if it's written in their IEP. But I specify in their IEP, if they're gonna get modified tests and quizzes, why and what is gonna be modified. If that makes any sense.
It does, and I'm just going to caution that when you use that word modify, it sounds like modification. Just be careful with that you're not making it too easy then for the students, and then those without disabilities, it's not there. You're changing the content too much. Just be careful. So, not a clear answer.
Well, and that's where I wonder if the teacher's the one that does it and not me as a special education teacher.
And you're saying, so basically what you're saying is if gen ed teacher does it, then I can wash my hands of it. And then I don't have to worry about it because then it's not a modification. Is that what I'm hearing you kind of asking? Or I think it needs to be a discussion between you and that gen ed teacher, and make sure you have that general understanding that they still have to meet the same standards as the other kids in the classroom, and they still have to show that they can meet that standard.
Okay.
You know, maybe it's not a multiple choice test. Maybe they read the question to the student can tell them the answer.
Okay.
Maybe the multiple choice questions just confuse them. But if they can tell them the answer without a multiple choice question, is that still showing their knowledge of the information? I think that's almost a harder test than having the multiple
Okay.
choice questions.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
Am I getting a little more clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and Beth and Michael, I would also say too, like in campus, there's not like a drop down that says accommodations. So I always make to clarify there's a drop down that says modifications. So I always clarify in that IEP that what are the accommodations we're doing. And I think back to what Beth said is it accommodation or modification? Like, and being very clear about the difference in those. But if you notice in a lot of us that use campus, there's not a drop down for accommodations, but there's modifications.
Oh, I thought there was.
Yeah, and that's where my question kind of led toward is on Infinite Campus, it doesn't let us change that. So
From accommodation to modification or modification to accommodation. I think it says accommodations and modifications, I think is what it says. And they're all lumped together.
yeah.
I think there's a comment box there, and I think what you have to do is just be specific in that comment box when you're choosing a modification or just be very specific on.
Yeah, that's where I put it in the comment box that these are accommodations.
Yep.
Not modifications. And then I would give examples of what they possibly could be.
Okay, that's kind of like what I'm doing with my SPED director when we sit down and look at IEPs is we need to clarify in that comment box.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so in campus they have like modified testing quizzes, modified assignments. There is no accommodations for those
Yeah.
kind of things in
Right.
campus. Yeah.
Because you don't think about accommodating a test, because when you're accommodating a test, it's more like a text to speech or a read aloud. You're not going to limit the number of answers or anything. You're gonna use how it's being done, not what's being done. Because when you change the number of answers, that's almost a what, not a how.
Mhm.
So that's why you have to be very cautious when you're doing that and very specific. The same with modifying assignments or shortening assignments. Be very specific in that comment box because again, when you're modifying the assignments or shortening the assignments, that's almost more of a modification, because when you're accommodating assignments, again, you are cutting them into chunks rather than they're still having to do the whole assignment, but it's just chunk. Do this first, do this second, then do this third. Rather than just only do the first section.
Hi, this is Sarah Feldhaus. I have a question. It might be a kind of large question though. And it kind of relates to, graduation requirements and then the bridge into transition programs. So there are some really good transition programs popping up, at tech schools and things like that, encourage the students to have completed the graduation requirements and then continue on their IEP as they go to these transition programs. I guess my question is what is your advice to get around some of these potential roadblocks or these conversations? Or how are we justifying these programs? Because I'm kind of running into some roadblocks with that. Like what's the obligation of the school to continue to provide services if they have met graduation requirements?
So maybe they have met the graduation requirements because they've met the number of courses they need to take and the required courses, but they have some transition services that they still need. So then that's how you justify that, because they're not ready to leave high school because they have transition needs yet. Maybe it's project skills, maybe it's they're still not comfortable with some of those soft skills. Maybe they need still some of those life skill classes type of programs. So that's how you justify it, is because the student still needs those transition services.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and obviously the big question is that it all comes down to is who's paying for what in the funding, and how does this fall under quote unquote FAPE and IDEA and things like that. I don't know if you have any clarification that I can kind of, I've been digging up some things from the United States Department of Education and things like that. And it's probably aligning with South Dakota, but I don't know if you just have any
It is.
advice, you know.
It is, and that document, remember that document that I said that's out there, that's on the high school graduation website? Oh, I'm gonna pull it up here. It's not, let me share my screen.
Sarah, I would also want to like give you just a little bit of feedback too. Being the coordinator of 18 to 21 transition programming here in Sioux Falls. One thing that we talk about as an IEP team is, does the student's disability impact them from demonstrating skills that typical 18 to 21-year-olds would demonstrate? That's not because they haven't had time to practice the skills, but because their disability impacts them from demonstrating them comparable to other 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds. And that really, you look back at their coordinated set of activities, you look at their measurable post-secondary goals, you look at their IEP goals, you look at their course of study compared to like other students, you kind of take all those transition components, and as a team, you look at the evidence and say, does this student's disability impact them from gaining the transition skills at a level comparable to other 18-year-olds?
That's a very good point.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I think we have that unfortunate group of students that ride that whatever 75 to 80 IQ, you know, or you know, we can, with all of these wonderful new, you know, electives we can offer them, at the diplomas are becoming more, you know, attainable, but it's like what about how do we provide them opportunity to go to post-secondary, you know? And I think that some of these programs are opening up that door, but now it's just getting over that hurdle of, why is the schools district still being a part of this, you know, plan?
Yeah, the justification for the district to pay, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Right.
get that.
Right. Because it's still part of that FAPE. As you said, Nikki, it's still part of that FAPE. Okay.
Hey, this is Robin again. I just want to gain some feedback from you guys. If you've ever fell into situations that you have parents that their student is 18 and their student's their own guardian, they want to sign up for services like Department of Labor or vocational rehabilitation services, and the parents are a big roadblock, or they want to do some assisted living after high school and the parents won't apply for like Social Security or provide the information to get those means set up. What are some things that any of you have done that have proven to be successful or not successful, or just some ways to brainstorm ideas to help students and their own legal guardian?
That's a great question. Somebody out there is going to have to help with that one, because I don't have an answer for that one.
I'm not going to talk, but I do see 18 to 21 transition staff from community campus on here. So I'm totally throwing them out there.
Will you repeat
I'm
the
not going to
question?
answer. Oh, there was Aaron.
Yeah, so the question was, how do you help support students that want to maybe access voc rehab, Department of Labor, live in like some independent living that they need to like apply for disability, that you need to finish those applications and the parents are not providing that information to do so, or necessarily in support of their student doing that. Like if a student says, hey, Mrs. Kickoff, I want to do voc rehab. And I say, great, we'll fill out application. Like they don't have all their information, their Medicaid or Social Security or whatever. And the parent's like, I don't care, figure it out yourself. You know, what would you do for that student?
So they're their own guardian.
Yes.
I'm new. I'm gonna say to direct them to Dakota at Home and get them set up with Family 360 and ILC. Kelly or Katie, you want to add?
Yeah, this is Katie. I would definitely connect them with independent living choice. ILC would assign them an independent living coordinator and that person would assist them through the process. But we've also had, like, we've made appointments and had book rehab come right to the school to meet with the student. If they're an independent adult, then they absolutely should have access to that information. And I would explain that to the parent as well.
Yes, and what if the parent says, well, I don't agree, I don't want them to do that. And I say, well, they're 18 and this is what they would like to do. And they say, no,
If if they're saying no, that means must have guardianship.
no, they don't. They don't.
Then I don't think they really,
Then I would recommend, I would send that parent to Betsy Drew at Parent Connections so she can help parents understand what they should be doing.
Perfect. Well, I mean, so like I'm documenting it and I'm trying, like voc rehab comes to school, probably meets with 6 or 7 of my kids and yeah, the student just couldn't wait till they were 18 and now the parent just is being pretty difficult. So yeah.
If the parent continues to be difficult, I would refer that young adult to disability rights
Okay.
because they do have their own rights. And they need to have somebody advocate for them. And if the case manager continues to advocate and the parent who they live under the roof, right?
Yeah.
They live under the roof, then I would recommend them on further because we don't want to get into that power struggle with the parents who still want to have a good relationship. But I would recommend, that young adult, if they want to do it, go to disability rights so they have somebody advocating in their corner as well.
Okay. That could be on their list of supportive people when parent wants them to be done this year. So we're kind of trying to get all that like personal information, like your address, your phone number, who's your doctor, all that kind of go-to lists of things. And we could practice that too. I like that. So, I mean, in the intern, we've set up a work program here at school and some other stuff that getting some job skills for that student and for a class and that we would do with voc rehab instead, but try to make it happen.
Connect them with Parent Connections too. Sometimes parents, they hear it over and over and over from the school and maybe just hearing it the same thing in a different way from Parent Connections might sink in.
Sure. Well, thank you.
I think just adding one more thing, I think that's a really good question. This is Dan and Pierre, and I think just as kind of a warm up to all of that is I think the earlier you start that discussion with the families too, as early as 8th and 9th grade, they're having that discussion so they're warmed up to it and getting that referral to those agencies early on, one at a time, but it gives you more time. And I think it also helps to answer questions and kind of walk through which each agency can do to assist with the process.
I was going to share, I did run into a family situation where he was definitely over 18. The parents were going one way, he was going another, didn't feel like he could have a say in anything. We did a PCTA on him. And I am here to tell you that that parent was done with me. I got in, she was hot. And she said, he's worse after he's talked to you. And I said, I think he's realizing that there's some decisions he can make. And I'm telling you, that relationship ended. I felt bad about it. And I was cautious with it, but trying to help with, you're at the age where these decisions could be made and can you work, and never saw him again. So not always successful, even though we give it a try.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you again to Beth and to Betsy and everyone who commented and helped out today and shared their experiences. Once again, we will be seeing you for the next transition roundup on April 24th. That will be the last one of the school year. And in the meantime, if you have questions about transition, IEPs, hooking up with adult services, you can always contact your liaison. We're here to help you. So thanks for coming, and we will see you in April.